Who rules the world? It's a simple question, right? But the answer, well, that's anything but. It's the kind of question that drives everything from front page news to the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. So, let's try and figure it out. Who is really in charge here?
I mean, is it the presidents and prime ministers we see on TV, the ones we vote for? Or is there something else going on? Some hidden layer of power? A small group of people pulling the strings from behind the curtain? This single question really sets up two completely different ways of looking at how the world works.
On one side, you've got the world of conspiracy theories, the idea that super-secret societies and incredibly powerful families are the ones dictating global events from the shadows. And on the other side, you have standard geopolitical analysis, which focuses on the power you can actually see and measure, the power held by nations, global institutions, and huge corporations.
But here's a thought. What if the truth isn't one or the other? What if global power is kind of like an onion? You've got to peel back multiple layers to even get close to the core. So let's do that. Let's start with the most obvious layer, the one we see every single day.
This is the world of geopolitics. You can think of it like a giant global stage where all the countries are actors, competing for influence, for resources, and ultimately for dominance. It's the most visible form of power, but don't let that fool you. It's incredibly complex.
For decades, the United States was pretty much the undisputed heavyweight champion, thanks to its military might and the dollar being the world's go-to currency. But that stage is definitely getting more crowded. China is rising at an incredible pace, becoming a giant in tech and economics. Russia still wields massive influence with its huge energy reserves and military. And you can't forget the European Union, which is a powerhouse as a combined economic bloc.
And this, right here, is a perfect example of how a rising power flexes its muscles. China's One Belt, One Road initiative, it's not just about building a few ports and railways. No. This is a strategic masterpiece. It's designed to carve out new trade routes, forge new political alliances, and completely reshape the economic map of the world. It's a direct challenge to the old way of doing things.
So here's the key takeaway from all this. The era of one single dominant superpower is kind of fading out. We're now moving into what experts call a multipolar world. You've got new alliances popping up like the BRICS nations. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're creating these alternative centers of power, and they're really starting to challenge the traditional Western-led system.
Okay, so this competition between nations is fierce, for sure. But it doesn't just happen in a free-for-all. There are rules, there are institutions, and agreements that are supposed to govern how everyone interacts, which leads to the next big question: who actually writes that rule book?
And that question brings us to our next layer of power. This layer acts almost like an invisible hand, shaping the entire global economy and political landscape through a handful of really powerful international organizations.
You've heard of these guys, the UN Security Council, where just 5 permanent members can veto any decision about war and peace. You've got the World Trade Organization, which sets the rules for who sells what to whom. And then you have the 2 financial titans, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how different their jobs are. The IMF, it's like the world's emergency lender. It gives short-term loans to countries in crisis. But, and this is a big but, those loans almost always come with very strict conditions, forcing governments to adopt specific economic policies. The World Bank, on the other hand, is more about the long game, funding big projects like dams and roads. In both cases, though, the countries with the biggest economies, especially the United States, get the most votes. And that means they have enormous influence over global financial policy.
All right, so we've looked at the power of nations and the power of institutions. But let's peel back another layer. Because what if the real power, the ultimate power, is something quieter, less visible, and operates on a scale that can actually dwarf entire countries? I'm talking about the power of pure capital.
Welcome to the realm of multinational corporations and global finance. This is a world where a decision made in a boardroom in New York or Shenzhen can ripple outwards and change the lives of millions of people all over the planet.
Just to help you wrap your head around the sheer scale we're talking about, look at this. The market value of just one company, Apple, is about the same as the entire annual economic output of a G7 nation like the United Kingdom. It's just staggering. And companies like Apple, Google, and Amazon don't just have economic power, they control the flow of information itself.
But hang on, because there's another level to this. A layer of financial power that is so concentrated, so powerful, that most of us have never even heard of it. We are talking about the Big Three.
Their names are BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They are not household names like Apple or Google, that's for sure, but these asset management firms operate at a level of financial influence that is honestly hard to even comprehend.
So get this. Together, just these three firms manage over $20 trillion in assets. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is more than the entire gross domestic product of the United States. It is an almost unimaginable amount of financial power, all concentrated in the hands of just three companies. So how exactly do they use all that power? Well, it's mainly through something called cross-shareholding. Basically, the Big Three are the largest shareholders in pretty much every major company you can think of. We're talking Microsoft, Coca-Cola, the big banks, you name it. They're even major shareholders in each other. This gives them an incredibly powerful voice inside the boardrooms of nearly every sector of the global economy, allowing them to quietly shape corporate strategy on a massive, massive scale.
And that brings us to a kind of chilling thought. What if the really critical decisions, the ones that truly shape our world, are made long before they ever reach the public eye, behind doors that we don't even know exist?
And this is where we get to the very heart of those conspiracy theories we talked about. The idea that there's a global elite, a secret network of people who coordinate their actions to steer the world according to their own hidden agenda.
You've probably heard some of these names before. The Bilderberg Group, which holds these intensely secret annual meetings of top politicians and CEOs, fueling all sorts of speculation. The Trilateral Commission, a group of elites founded to encourage global cooperation, which critics see as a shadow world government. And, of course, the Illuminati, the legendary secret society that is said to have been pulling the strings for centuries.
Now, the supposed goal of all these groups is something often called a New World Order. The theory goes that their ultimate aim is to get rid of national borders, dissolve individual countries, and create a single, unified world government, which they, of course, would be in charge of.
Okay, so after peeling back all of these layers, from nations to institutions to corporations, all the way to alleged secret societies, where does that leave us? Who actually rules the world?
Well, the most honest answer is, there isn't one single ruler. It's a mistake to think of global power as a pyramid, with one person or one group sitting at the very top. It's much more like a complex, dynamic, and constantly shifting network. Power is spread out among nations, all competing for an edge, international institutions that try to set the rules, corporations that are richer than most countries, and influential elite groups that operate across all of these different domains.
And that network is never, ever static. The rise of new technologies, new economic powers, it all means the map of global influence is constantly being redrawn. So maybe the ultimate question isn't just who rules the world today, but rather, as this incredibly intricate web continues to change and evolve, who is going to be in a position to grab power tomorrow?